Happy Monday and welcome to The Hash. We bring you the latest and greatest in crypto and culture. I'm Jen Sanasi. I have all my friends here, Will Foxley, Naomi Brockwell, and George Kaludis. Naomi, why don't you kick us off with the first story? Also, I love your autumn look here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I love your studio look. Studio looks good on you, Jen. You should do that more often. All right, we're going to start off the day by talking about the infrastructure bill. We have been talking about this since August, at least, when they snuck in some crypto provisions into the giant spending bill, and the crypto provisions were not taken well by the crypto community. There was a lot of pushback. There were a couple of amendments that people tried to get pushed through at the 11th hour. There was no success. And then on Friday, the infrastructure bill was voted on and passed. So what does this mean for crypto? It's a lot of stuff to dive into. The first thing that I will mention, and I'll throw it to the group, we can dig into some of the others, is that, this isn't the end of it. There are things that the crypto community can do and is planning to do from here. Jerry Brito has written at length about the next steps here. One of them includes a challenge against an existing law that Coin Center argues is unconstitutional, and that is the cash reporting general provision that exists currently. And we can dive into why he says that is unconstitutional. But to start off with, I'm just going to throw it to the group for your takes. I think that, this is terrible news for crypto, in my opinion. It's not great, but it's not the end of the world. And it seems that the markets did not respond too negatively for this. Bitcoin itself went above 65,000 again, kind of inching towards its all-time high. Ethereum passed its previous all-time high, hit a new one. So markets are looking good despite things like this going through. So Will, I'll throw to you first for your thoughts on all of this.
Well, first, a question I have for you. Didn't they take out the $600 reporting piece that was in the previous infrastructure bill, or did they leave that in? I thought I saw.
I have no idea about the $600, but the $10,000 is still in there. And Coin Center is arguing that third-party doctrine needs to include a third party. And so if you're dealing with peer-to-peer transactions where there's literally only two parties, then it's an unconstitutional provision to require reporting of this stuff without a warrant and without probable cause for something. So, but I'll throw it back to you, Will.
Totally, yeah. It's fascinating to see that you can have such terrible language included in a bill, and it remains. It survived the last 4 months of lobbying efforts, and it wasn't taken out, even though almost everyone on both sides of the aisle is pretty much convinced that this language is poor. Even the first writers of the draft of the infrastructure bill tried to get an amendment in that would change that language. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter though, just because how the system is set up, it's very difficult to make changes once things start going through the process. I think it is notable and a good point to be made that this part of the provision doesn't go into effect for quite a while, about a year, maybe even a little bit longer than that.
So 2024 is the date.
2024. What year is it? It's 2021.
2021.
Okay, so we got a while.
They're all just blending together.
It's been a long weekend. You have no idea. So there's still a lot of time for this to be struck down in court, a lot of issues along the way for this bill to kind of happen and start affecting cryptocurrency users. The frustrating part is that the industry has to go through that now. They have to spend resources devoted to that. They're already spending a lot of resources on Capitol Hill tackling issues like this bill specifically. I'm going to throw this up to George, though.
Yeah, well, it's the exact point I was thinking about. 2024 is so far out there, and it's very much old world meets new world, right? Crypto moves fast. We have things get decided on within days or even hours sometimes. And our politicians are out here saying, oh, we'll get this finalized in 2024. Like, how does it take you that long? And I'm not a big fan of politics, but this just seems so identity driven. It's like one side versus the other, but then even when they agree with each other, they can't agree with each other, or that means that you're, not a good Republican or a good Democrat. So it's just a little bit frustrating timing wise, but Jen, you had a point there. I want to throw it to you.
Yeah, just coming off of that old world versus new world point that you made, the provision that Naomi was referring to is from a law that was written 40 years ago that was meant for cash transactions between people over $10,000. And now that's being applied to crypto transactions. And Naomi, I'll kick it back to you to explain more about this. And we've talked about it on the show time and time again. That one provision is really scary because that brings us back to this conversation that we've been having around data governance and privacy and protection. And so if I'm expected to now take in SIN numbers and KYC information, and there's no information out there for me as to how I'm going to store that and what I'm going to do with that, that opens up a whole can of worms that I guess we have 2 years to figure out how this is gonna pan out. But it's just crazy to me that a bill can be passed and now we just say, okay, great, now we're gonna stop, slow down, and define all of these terms when there was ample opportunity to define them to begin with.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when this provision was put forward as applying to cash, there was no real lobby group for cash. There was no group of hardcore cash enthusiasts who were like, we're going to fight this provision. And when you have the costs that are just diffused across society, there was no real impetus to fight this. Now you have it applying to crypto, and there's a huge impetus to fight this. And so what Jerry Brito says, he says that some aspects of the law, like the 6050 provision of individual reporting requirement, are unconstitutional. If they're not fixed by later legislation, we will mount a court challenge. So what this provision is generally, it's based on this idea of the third-party doctrine, which came out of a case where the government was trying to, get this murderer in jail, and they couldn't figure out how to get him. They knew it was him, and they were like, okay, well, let's, kind of tweak some things about who owns data. And they basically ruled that if you are using a third party like a bank, or if you are using a data center or AT&T, they're a third party, all of your data doesn't belong to you anymore because that company, you've given that company the right to take that data. And so they're applying that to reporting requirements. And they're saying, banks, we will force you to hand over information. If there's anyone who makes a cash transaction over $10,000, we want you to report it to us. And that was all legal, according to them, because of this third-party doctrine. Now, if you're dealing with, then they applied it to cash. Now, cash is like person to person. You don't necessarily need a bank for that. So there's no third party involved with that. In crypto, there's absolutely no third party in a lot of transactions. It's a peer-to-peer technology. It doesn't need a third party. And so it makes a lot of sense to me that they would be mounting pushback against this, going through an appeal and ruling this unconstitutional, because it's just a crazy overreach of government there. But let's change track and look at some other crazy court rulings and legal proceedings. George, what's going on in the world of Craig Wright?
Yeah, let's see if our government actually comes out and says one day that Bitcoin is digital cash. I'd love to see that happen. But let's talk about someone who's known in the crypto world for pretending to be the creator of Bitcoin. And I'm sure he's been talked about on the show before. Craig Wright, who claims he's Satoshi through a very crudely and loosely constructed list of Bitcoin addresses that he claims he owns, some which may or may not be owned by Satoshi as is. But last week, a civil trial was kicked off between Craig and a late business partner of his, whose estate is suing him for stealing Bitcoin that they allegedly mined together in the early days of Bitcoin. And before we dive into this, I want to make a couple of things very clear. This is not a case that decides if Craig is Satoshi. This is, in fact, a civil case between two people who are purporting things for whatever reason they're purporting those things. And the second point I want to make is Craig is certainly not Satoshi. And I want to steal a quote from CoinDesk. David Morris has been on the show a bunch, and I'm going to read it right now. The whole thing has a bizarre air of a snake eating its own tail, except neither the snake nor the tail actually exist. And there's a whole lot of hand waving going on here. And given the amount of attention, this tomfoolery, this monkey business, this word that starts with a D and rhymes with uckery, in my opinion, just shows how early we still are in this world. The fact that this type of back and forth is getting any sort of media attention, any sort of social media attention, and is being misconstrued as critically important to the success of Bitcoin is totally off base. And I'm yearning for the day that we can stop talking about this guy. And to that, I'd like to get Naomi's take, given Craig unfortunately hails from the same country as you.
Oh, why do you have to put us all? I disown my country at the moment anyway. They're doing some dumb stuff. Yeah, great transition. Well, so this case, I've been following it super closely ever since we had the preliminary trials about this and all of the evidence was put forward. And it's like, it's the craziest thing. And it doesn't seem that Craig can come out of it well either way, because on the one hand, he proves that, yes, I have all of this Bitcoin, in which case he has to hand over a huge amount of money, like billions and billions and billions of dollars to the Kleiman estate. And on the other hand, he basically has to say, well, I don't want to hand over that money, and so I don't have that money. And if he's now admitting that he doesn't have the money, then what is his claim to being Satoshi predicated on? If you look at the evidence that's put forward, and obviously we know that Craig is an incredibly litigious person who's going after everyone who dares to utter anything about the credulity of his claims. So we won't make any assertions on this show, but it's definitely alleged, and there's strong evidence to suggest that he is doing a lot of fraudulent stuff and lying about a lot of stuff, which includes backdating documents. And it's been shown in courts, like a lot of the documents he put forward as evidence are fraudulent. Things like backdating where he'll just like change the date in an email, but then it didn't change any of the metadata associated with that. And so it's, things like that. There was one instance where he offered some communication between him and Kleiman on an instant messenger that didn't even exist at the time. So things like that, it gets pretty crazy, like the hoops that this guy's jumping through. But I'm entertained, to say the least. And I know that he goes on trial himself. He takes a stand today. I'm very interested to follow up and see what he comes out with, because it tends to be quite entertaining. But I'll throw to you, Will, for your take.
This trial has just, how long has it been going on for now? I feel like it's been at least 2-3 years in the making.
Yeah.
And it's the same kind of story gets pulled out every time. Yeah, it's such a long pulled on story. And all of it started in like 2015, 2016, right? Between the estate and Craig Wright. Of course, Craig Wright is just, he's done in the industry. It's very hard to put yourself in a position where you won't have a following in the cryptocurrency industry. Just like a Justin Sun, he's managed to stick around for all these years, regardless of the stuff and shenanigans he's pulled. Craig Wright is probably in the bottom of the barrel. Somehow he's really, really managed to kind of kick himself and ostracize himself out of the entire industry. And now we have this case. So I'm almost disinterested in it, because it's just like, it's this lunatic who I don't care about, and he's still just talking his own bag. So that's my take on it. I know it's probably not the one you're expecting, but that's all I think about whenever I see this trial go on.
One thing I will add is that Gavin Andresen, who really was one of the people who gave the strongest support for Craig in the early days, the idea was that Craig went and tried to prove to Gavin that he was Satoshi. Now, Gavin, as we know, was the person who first took control of the repo for Bitcoin. And so he would have had intimate knowledge of Satoshi and had so many communications. And apparently, Craig Wright was able to convince Gavin back in the day through a lot of magician tricks and a computer where he signed something but wouldn't ever sign it publicly. And, all of these strange things that happened. And Gavin at the time was like, yeah, I think this guy is Satoshi. And even he told the court last week that he says that the Wright's evidence for the claim was certainly a deception, if not an outright lie. So it seems that even he is now backtracking on it. And, he kind of stood by what he saw when Craig signed the message privately on that what was meant to be a new computer back in the day. So just very interesting to see this stuff unfold. But Jen, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, it's just such a circus. Everyone's kind of covered what I wanted to say about it. But George, I have a question for you. You look so angry as we talk about this. Why did you bring this story to the table today? You look so mad about it.
I want to share the anger amongst friends. I am entertained by the fact that Craig sort of talks like he's some sort of evil villain, if you read some of the things he said, but he doesn't have the ability to actually follow through and be the evil villain. But Naomi, what were you going to say there?
I mean, it's fascinating to me that we created a system where we can, Satoshi created a system where you can decentralize trust, where you no longer need third parties and people who could be corruptible or court systems or any of that to prove anything. You can rely on mathematics and encryption proofs and all of that. And yet Craig is saying, to hell with that thing that I supposedly invented. I'm going to use the court system to prove whether or not I'm Satoshi. And I'm going to depend on the court system and force people to take down my white paper as they did to Bitcoin.org. I mean, he's really just using this legal system in scenarios where it's completely unnecessary. If he actually wanted to prove that he was Satoshi, he would just sign a message using the private key associated one of the addresses known to be Satoshi's. So it hasn't happened, and there are people who will remain skeptical of the credulity of his claims until that happens. And I don't think that's ever going to happen, quite personally. So let's move on there, and we're going to go to a break. So coming up, we're talking about Elon Musk, the man with the power to move markets with a single tweet. So that is coming up next.
CoinDesk indexes, the market standard for crypto assets since 2014. The CoinDesk DeFi Index is our latest product and provides insight and exposure into decentralized finance. Our indexes are key for investors looking to access and understand crypto markets.
The CoinDesk DeFi Index is the best tool for a diversified approach to this compelling new category of digital assets.
The CoinDesk DeFi Index, measuring the investable DeFi market.
And welcome back to the Hash. So we're going to talk about our favorite character in crypto Twitter. I don't know how he got adopted. Probably all that Bitcoin he bought earlier this year. But Elon Musk is tweeting again. He's talking about selling some of his capital in his company, Tesla, in order to kind of like test the waters on this unrealized tax gains theory that's going around Washington, D.C. He said that he'd sell 10% of his Tesla stock depending on the results of his Twitter poll. There's results in front of you. 58% of Twitters decided that he should sell 10% of his stock. Then Tesla's stock itself dropped 2.5% this morning, which is a pretty big drop for any equity. But for Tesla, that's not like a huge drop. We've seen multiple drops of over 5% in recent history. But just kind of continues the story of Elon Musk moving markets with just his thumbs. Naomi, I'm going to throw this one over to you.
Yeah, it's interesting because Elon is kind of a master, and he sometimes puts tweets out there, like when he first said that Bitcoin would stop being accepted at Tesla stores, and everyone was like, "Oh my god!" And he's like, "Yeah, because of the environment, am I right?" And then we find out that he's like in the middle of doing this deal with the EPA or something, and you're like, "Oh, is that why?" And then this is coming out, and he's like, "Oh, well, unrealized capital gains, am I right?" And then we find out that actually there's a good chance he would have had to sell a bunch of this stuff this year anyway, because he had a bunch of options that were about to expire. So he has a big tax bill anyway, and so he's going to sell it, and so he's kind of lumping this together. But I mean, we can dig into this whole unrealized capital gains ridiculousness some more if we want. Like, probably the best tweet that I saw that kind of sums up how dumb the idea of paying tax on unrealized capital gains is. It's like, well, can I start claiming deductions on unrealized children? Because this whole thing, like, if it's unrealized, it's not there. Like, you can't just be making these assertions about things that haven't eventuated. So it's kind of a ridiculous scenario. So it does bother me, regardless of why Elon is doing it, that he is giving lip service to this whole unrealized capital gains ridiculousness, because it does give it some credibility, and I think it deserves none. But I will throw it to you, George, for your take.
Yeah, before I get it back to Elon, I would say about the unrealized capital gains conversation, if my retired grandmother has to pay a bunch of taxes on the house that she bought in the 40s or 50s, I'm going to have a lot of problems with government. I know me just saying I have problems doesn't have much credence, but I'm sure there are a lot of old people out there who've had homes for 40 years, whose houses have appreciated because of a lot of tomfoolery from the government printing money. So I'd be very upset if my grandmother would have to sell her house just so she could pay a tax bill. But back to Elon and Lord Edge, if you will. I love that he's consistently trying to stick it to the SEC and the regulators, right? Doing a Twitter poll about if he should sell 10% of his shares, 10% of the shares that he holds in Tesla is a complete departure from what it means to be a fiduciary, right? You're not supposed to do that, but he just said, screw it. I don't care what the SEC thinks. I don't care what the regulators think. And then he starts trying to move markets with Dogecoin. I will take a small victory as someone who really likes Bitcoin, that it seems like Elon is kind of taking his foot off the pedal of trying to manipulate Bitcoin. So maybe he takes it more seriously than he does take, even his own company's shares and Dogecoin. In terms of Tesla being valued at what it's valued at, I have a lot of choice things to say there, but we won't get into that here. I'd rather just throw it to Naomi, see what she has to say.
Just on note of what you were saying, then I'll throw it to Jen. So, George, you mentioned all the tomfoolery that the government does, which is inflating the money supply, devaluing the dollar. Things seem like they're worth a lot more, but are they really? It's such a great point. And someone made a great tweet about it last week that I retweeted, Devin Zugel, who said, if hanging around Argentines has taught me anything, it's that inflation has endlessly surprising effects. If you buy a house for $1 million, then inflation halves the value of USD, and then you sell for $2 million, you get taxed on capital gains of $1 million, even though in real terms your profit was zero. So it's such a great point that you bring up about all of this, asset inflation that we're seeing around and these gains that people are making, like how much of that is actually the value increasing and like in real terms, and how much of that is just the value of the US dollar decreasing. So it's craziness to me, all of this stuff. So Jen, I'll just throw it to you for final words.
Yeah, before we head on over to China, I know we have to move on. I just want to say, whatever happened to Elon's Twitter babysitter? Is that not a thing anymore?
Never existed. Never existed.
Yeah, rage quit.
Yeah, they were like, just not doing this anymore. Bye. Anyways, let's move on to China for a great story, I think, to wrap this segment up. The Bank of China has revealed a machine that converts foreign currency into digital yuan. So the machine is likely to be rolled out for the 2022 Olympics, when China's CBDC is expected to be introduced to the rest of the world. So Naomi, I'm gonna kick this off to you. I believe it was in July or June that Senator Cynthia Lummis said that U.S. athletes should be wary of the CBDC at the Chinese Olympics because it could be used as a Trojan horse to infiltrate privacy in the U.S. So just wondering what your thoughts are on this machine in relation to that comment.
Well, I think that comment is really spot on. I mean, when you're dealing with, first of all, downloading whatever software you need to hold the digital yuan on your phone, you got to be really careful with permissions and the fact that you can be installing a Trojan horse on your device. So I'd be very, very careful of that if I were heading to China, participating in this. And on the other side of things, just in general, I'd be careful using the digital yuan in general, because it's going to be tracking everything you're doing. This is going to give you no privacy at all. But anytime you use digital form of money, it is tracking everything you're doing. Let's not kid ourselves that using your bank card is any different. I would just be aware of that if you're doing things in China, because they don't have a great human rights record. With this machine, they mean like a money exchanger? I don't really understand. So they've just automated the process of exchanging Forex. So I didn't quite understand why this was like an amazing thing. I guess it's like an ATM that instead of, getting money out of your bank account, you put in the foreign currency and it, credits something to your phone. It's like, okay, cool. Have you ever tried using cryptocurrency where you can literally trade in and out of thousands of different cryptocurrencies in a second, and you don't need to find one of these physical machines, and you can do it in a second in real time on your phone, and the transfer is made in real time. When countries come out with machines like this, I feel like they're trying to make foreign currencies take away some of the friction around sovereign fiat currencies, because there is so much friction. But I just don't think they're keeping up with the crypto space, which is just so much more convenient to anyone who lives in the digital world these days. But I'll throw it to you, Will, for your take.
No, I'm kind of echoing what you said. It seems like a one-way ATM here, where it's I'm going to put my money in, use this digital yuan, and then I guess spend it there. And obviously you could probably get it both ways, but there's really just one purpose, and that's onboarding people who are going to China for whatever purpose. I guess the Olympics here. and being able to use like this new product that the Bank of China has been rolling out over the last 2-3+ years. So I guess on that sense, it's an interesting adoption tactic to get people to start using this product. See if it plays out. I still have a lot of concerns about it. I don't like any of these products all over. I hope the US ever does it, but that probably will happen. So, oh well. I know. Boo. Sad.
I have two things I want to say here is that I will never get over the fact that our governments think that the operative word here is digital. It's not the digital part that we care about. And I will keep saying this forever. That's not the piece. And the second part is when I saw this piece on CoinDesk or the short article, I just couldn't get past the subheader where it said, you do not need a bank account, but you need a passport. It's like they're so close to getting it. It's like as if getting a passport is super easy to get, right? It's just so close to being what we're trying to achieve.
George, what is the important thing? It's not digital, so what is it?
It's decentralized, it's permissionless, it's borderless, it's all the good stuff there. And privacy, I'd say, too. But this is the opposite of privacy. It's China. What do you expect there? But we don't care that it's digital. I mean, it's great that it's digital. It makes it really portable, but that's not the operative word. That's not the most important thing. Our money is, in a way, digital now. It's not a digital bearer asset, but it is digital. It's seriously digital. How many of you carry cash? Will probably doesn't carry cash. I certainly don't carry cash. So anyway, Jen, sorry.
Digital cash.
Yeah, I carry digital cash.
Yeah, I was just going to add in quickly there. I don't know if any of you have ever been to China, but it is very hard to participate in transactions in China, full stop. A lot of stores don't accept credit cards. It's even sometimes hard to pay in fiat currency. Everyone uses WeChat, right? Which is another tool to track and compromise privacy, especially for people who don't live in China. And so this isn't a really innovative thing for me, George. I agree with everything you're saying. Crypto is the way, and this machine seems a little ridiculous, but here we are.
Here we are. All right, we're going to wrap that up for the day. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been The Hash. Thank you so much, Will, George, Jen, that studio. Got to say it again. I hope that you're in there for a bunch more.
This is my last day here. I know. Right, I'm so sorry to everyone who just loves this backdrop.
Put in a green screen behind you next time. We'll just make it look like that. But thank you for tuning in. But stick around. We do have All About Bitcoin coming up at 3 p.m. with Christine Lee. And then tomorrow morning, First Mover at 9. In the meantime, you can check out the CoinDesk website, find out about all of the latest news. We'll be back here as usual at 12 tomorrow for The Hash. Thank you so much for watching today.